they were relatively young. I have a sister that's 7 years younger. And from an early age, I kind of realized combination of, growing up, immigrant parents, everything else, that if I wanted something, I had to make it happen, right? My parents were very generous, very hardworking, but ultimately I realized that if I wanted something, it was out there and I had to go do it. So I was always in some way or another working, hustling, picking up jobs, everything else.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for listening. And if you're into real estate, this is one of those episodes that you should share with your buddies. We got Yar Amin on, and he's going to get into how to be a big player in real estate. Even if you have no money, we're going to talk about syndication. He's going to talk about how he found his path, how you can find your path, and uniquely looking into the distant future to figure, is this the right path? And finally, we're going to get into making sure you have the right circle of friends. Iron shapes iron. Welcome to the show and welcome to the Edge of Excellence. Yashaar, I know you are a busy dude. You got all sorts of companies out there, all sorts of projects, and I really appreciate you making time. I'm super excited about the show today. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your excellence with us today.
Thanks for having me, Matt. I'm excited to be here too. You're obviously a longtime friend and business associate too, so it's really great to get together.
Business associate. I don't know that we're official business associates. We're advisors of each other, and we're going to get into it because Yashaar is a real estate expert and I'm not. And as the listeners know, we are on a mission to help 20-somethings understand all the awesome jobs that are out there. And real estate is one of the hot button issues for me because it's more than flip or flop. And Yashaar has done some crazy stuff. He directed the management of more than 2 million square feet of retail, office, and mixed use when he worked for RP Realty Partners. He's led investments and development initiatives representing over $4 billion in capital. This is the real deal. This isn't flipping and flopping. And he oversaw acquisitions and asset management for the real estate group within the wonderful company. And Yashaar, we're going to get into all that. We're going to get into your life. We're going to get into the path. We're going to get into how you do it. But before we do, Yashaar, I got to know, what's your definition of excellence?
It's a great question. And I think, to the extent you guys are focused on 20-something, I look back at what my definition would have been back then, and it would have been completely different, right? It would have been driven by money, financial success. Today, the answer is different, where my definition of success are strong relationships, making progress, having goals, going after them, and stability, good health. That's my definition of excellence. If I'm doing those things, if I'm good relationships with my family, my business partners, people I'm dealing with, if I'm making progress on all the stuff I'm working on, I'm getting to my goals, and I'm enjoying myself, that to me is excellent. Okay, so you are excellent in real estate. You are excellent in advising people on real estate, but it doesn't matter to you if you don't have the strong relationships like I know you do. You're not progressing and growing and getting better. So excellence is a progress. It's a process. It's not a destination. For sure.
Okay. Well, we're going to get into your excellence. Now, I didn't realize this. I knew you went to UC Irvine. I didn't realize you got a master's at Columbia. So you are also an Ivy Leaguer. So we're going to get into how you get into Ivy League schools. You worked in real estate in many different jobs and a couple different companies. Then you founded your own business. And I believe you did it with not a whole lot of money. I know you made kind of a lot of money, especially for your age when you did it. But you started and got into big time real estate with other people's money. We're going to get into that. And you live in Laguna Beach and soon to be my neighbor. We're going to live together in Three Arch after you move there and then find me a house, because it's really hard to find a house in Three Arch. So you get to have your family on the beach and you work in Laguna. You got the perfect balanced life Everything's working for you. We got to know the path. So let's go back to high school. Were you kicking ass in high school? Were you screwing around? I just know you were kicking ass, weren't you?
Uh, you know what? I look back high school, I did well. I got into UC Irvine, which at the time was not as hard to get into as it is today. But I took honors classes. I was in varsity sports. I played water polo. Had a good group of friends that I'm still fortunate to say 25 years later, I'm still very close to. And to this day, do actually business with a number of them. And we trade stories and everything else. So high school was a really good uh, time in my life. And I was fortunate to go to a really great public school in Sacramento called Rio Americano.
Oh, shout out to Sacramento. Shout out to Sacramento. Go Kings.
Go Kings. Go Kings still a diehard fan. Die easy, I guess, these days. But Sacramento was a great place to grow up. I still love going back there. And it really did give me a good foundation. It's a good, solid place to grow up. There's a lot going on as far as, my peer group and everything else. And I think that gave me kind of the motivation to not lag behind, because I saw all my friends, what they were doing. I was really fortunate to have a good friend group. And that eventually led me to college and kind of continued me on my path.
Okay, so your definition of excellence is all about this strong relationships, progress, building, and I'm just going to interpret strong relationships, loving relationships, giving relationships, mutual relationships. You're always giving, you're not taking. That started in high school for you. And you surround yourself with, and Nicole McMacken, one of my friends did episode, I think, 2, and she will also be on episode 165. She says, she quotes Aristotle, "You are the sum of your 5 closest friends." You figured that out early. You found there were peers at your public school that weren't pushing and moving and doing great things, but you found out early in life, strong relationships, build these relationships for life, and we'll succeed together. It's not they're going to help me succeed. We're going to succeed together, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think I bring this up today with my kids in sports. Iron sharpens iron, right? You don't look at other people around you as necessarily competition. You look at them as there's a big world out there. There's enough for everybody. We got to figure out a way to band together and pull each other up. And I've been fortunate that I've had friends that felt the same way. And to the extent we compete each other, it's more of a friendly competition where we're kind of keeping each other accountable. If one of my friends is doing something, I want to know about it. What are you into? What's going on? This is what I'm into. And we share these things. And that's actually where I get a lot of energy from. It's not a zero-sum game, that's for sure. And if you surround yourself with people with the same mentality that don't look at relationships as transactional, I think you tend to get a lot of growth out of that. And you start realizing that's what life is all about, is the strength and quality of your relationships.
So I'm sure you've experienced this before. And I think, people say it doesn't matter what you know, it matters who you know. And there's this concept of networking and mentorship. You and I go at it palm down. And you just said non-transactional. So early in life, you and I figured out relationships aren't transactional. So if you're listening right now and you're thinking about mentors and you're thinking about who you know, it's not about what they do for you. It's about what you do for them. Palm down, never asking for anything. And so you and I both have surrounded ourselves with these, quote, non-transactional relationships, loving relationships, giving relationships, friendship for the right reason. But we're picking people with the same values, the same drive, the same iron to sharpen iron. So you started early figuring that out. I kind of figured that out in college. And you're sitting there up in Sacramento. Were you going to Kings games?
I was. As a matter of fact, I was. And it was a lot easier to get into them back in the day. And I did go to quite a few when I was growing up. And, my love for sport, especially basketball, is kind of continued my whole life. And
so I probably shouldn't tell this story, especially on air, but I was at the old arena before they built that wonderful Golden One arena, which is so awesome.
Arco.
Yeah, I was at the Arco arena. And I had the privilege to go into the locker room. And there's the locker room, and then there's this little seating area. And they had this player that was really famous, like an A-list player, but he was kind of a problem. And so he ended up, I think, he still plays, I think, really famous. I don't know anything about sports. I think he may have been a center. He went to Houston, maybe. I don't want to say his name because I'm about to tell this story, but I'm sitting in this chair, like, like a normal chair. And I didn't realize people walk around in the locker room naked, but he was walking and he was swinging and everything got very close to my face as he walked by. And what I learned was, don't sit in the chair near where people are walking in a professional sport locker room. That's what I learned. And by the way, I still go to Sacramento Kings games. We should go to one. I love to go.
You let me know, man.
I love
you
to
let
go
me
to
know.
games. I might be able to get us some good tickets. I will work on that. Thank you for doing my podcast. I will work on that. So you're in high school, you're playing water polo, you got great friends, you're taking honors classes, you're kind of on a path to go to a UC school, which were known as the public Ivies back then when we were in going into college. Then you decided you wanted to get another Ivy in there. And what was going on in Irvine? What was happening with you at UC Irvine? What were you doing to get ahead in life?
So I think I realized early on, I mean, I have two parents who are very well educated, but immigrants. And they had me when they were in grad school or shortly after. So they were relatively young. I have a sister that's 7 years younger. And from an early age, I kind of realized combination of, growing up, immigrant parents, everything else, that if I wanted something, I had to make it happen, right? My parents were very generous, very hardworking, but ultimately I realized that if I wanted something, it was out there and I had to go do it. So I was always in some way or another working, hustling, picking up jobs, everything else. And when I got to college, all of a sudden it's this bigger world, bigger kind of like new place, right? I was in Orange County, went to Sacramento. I'm living in Orange County. First week I'm in college, I go to Newport Beach. I'm on the peninsula, and I'm just like, wow, right? Yeah. Like I knew that Irvine was in Orange County. I knew that Orange County had the beach, but all of a sudden you're sitting there looking at the Pacific Ocean, and you're like all by yourself, 18 years old, and it's just like there's a thing, and to some degree it's overwhelming. But again, I had the benefit of going to UTI with one of my dear friends, who's still one of my best friends in the world, was the best man at my wedding, my buddy Gerald Hammer, who's also in real estate. And we had each other. And we had another good friend that was up in Long Beach that we'd see all the time. We had friends up at LA, up in San Diego. So I did have the benefit of kind of having, while being in a new place, I had a lot of familiar faces around me. And there wasn't any blueprint. I didn't have parents that were kind of on top of me. They were figuring out life for themselves, try to continue to progress, thrive, and everything else. And I realized that I had to do it on my own, but I also realized that there's no blueprint out there. So I had typical kind of college jobs early on. I did my freshman, sophomore year, and my junior year of college, I went to the career center and I looked kind of like you look on a menu. I looked, the job postings were on the left and pay was on the right. And it would say school credit. And at the time, minimum wage was probably $5 an hour. It was like, I think $4.25, $4.75, something like that. And this one said $10 an hour. And I look over to the left and it said commercial real estate associate. So I answered the ad, and it turns out to be for a small, really one-man shop that was doing tenant rep brokerage. And my job ultimately was, I got a job there, $10 an hour plus $25 for every meeting I set up for them. And if I got my license, I get a piece of the deals that I actually put together. So if I set up cold called someone, it led to a meeting, I had $25. If that meeting turned into a lease or a transaction, I'd get a piece of it. My first day I worked there, I worked 4 hours, and I set up 3 meetings. And so that was, and I worked there for a while. 3 meetings in a day was a really good outcome. But that first day I thought I was set. I thought, oh, this is easy. And at the time, I'm like, I just made $115, right? I realized later I was a 1099er and said 115 bucks wasn't all mine, right? But it gave me that start. I'm like, if I pick up the phone and I'm willing to be brave enough to pick up the phone and really just wing it, right? Because I didn't have any training at that point, either in cold calling or in real estate. I could I could make something out of it, right? And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed kind of learning. I had the gift of gab. I was able to be good on the phone, and I realized I could leverage that into a way to make money at the time, right? Like, how do I? My buddies are bartending. Some of them are, valeting, caddying, and I was kind of comparing myself to, like, how can I maximize the time away from school to make money, to do all the things I wanted to do when I was in college, right? My parents were generous to the extent they could be, but it's basically just covering my rent, right? Everything else was on me. So I really knew that I had to figure out a way to hustle so that I could not only make money in college, but eventually set myself up. But it's one of the things, looking back, it looks very linear, but it wasn't, right? You're just kind of figuring out as you go without necessarily a cohesive plan. I didn't have grad school on my mind. I didn't have any of these things that would happen in the next 2, 3, 20 years in front of me planned out by any means.
And so I just want to back up a little bit. You figured out you need to make it happen. Let's just stop right there for a second. My kids, they're going to do pretty well in life because eventually they're going to inherit something from me. I'm not dying for 50 years or more. So my son's 23. So when he's 73, he'll get something from me. He's got to make it happen. So no matter what your situation is, you got to make it happen. If you're listening right now and your parents have a little bit of money, they're not dying. You got to make it happen. They can't give you all the money. You got to pay tax on it if they do. You got to make it happen. And what else? My daughter, she didn't have a job, so she was out power washing my house. She's under dad management now, so she went a month, didn't get a job, so now she's working for me. So excited when you get money that you earned yourself. And power washing a house is cool because you blast all the stuff off and it goes from looking horrible to looking good. So exciting to accomplish something. So you realize you need to make it happen because you did. I grew up in New Mexico, similar to Sacramento. I moved to Santa Barbara, similar to Irvine. I had that same experience, and I realized I need to make it happen because my parents only paid for rent too. So was I unlucky? I wasn't one of the spoiled kids? No, I was lucky. You were lucky. Then the other thing is that people get confused on, there's only 3 summers. Summer after your freshman, summer after your sophomore, summer after your junior. The 4th summer, you got to have a job, and it takes all year to get the job. Start in September. If you're listening, start in September looking for your job when you're a senior. It takes longer than you think you will. Listen to your parents. So you're taking advantage. You're not spending your summers, you're investing your summers. You have these variety of jobs. When did you go into tenant rep? And we're going to come back to tenant rep after we deal with Columbia. When did you go into tenant rep? How old were you?
I was about 20 years old.
You're juniors?
I was just starting my junior year.
And is that the last job you had in college? You kept that job through college?
Yeah, for the most part. I also waited tables on the side too. School to me was a means to an end. For better or for worse, when I was there, I'm like, I needed to get a degree, right? I ultimately got a degree in environmental analysis and design because there wasn't a major in real estate. There wasn't a major. I started actually as a criminology major because I thought I was going to go to law school. I really enjoyed I still do. I love the kind of, crime solving, like all that part of it. But I really enjoyed that, but I didn't want to go into law enforcement. I didn't want to go into the law. So that turned into a minor, and I'm like, okay, I like real estate. I got to do something that's related to it. There was no school or undergraduate degree in urban planning. So the only way you could kind of get something like that was environmental analysis and design. So I got good enough grades to graduate. Proud to say I had a 2.3 GPA in college, undergrad.
And you went to Columbia?
I went to Columbia. We'll get into that. But I knew that to the extent that I was going to be successful, it was going to be based on the momentum that I created for myself, right? And the people that I met, and networking in kind of a more primitive way, right? Where I put myself out there, I met people, and hopefully they liked what I was about, the fact that I was young. And, when you're young, you have the benefit of energy and
people like it. People like just the fact that you're young. They like the energy and the new ideas.
Yeah, you're a blank slate, and if you're willing to work, people see that. They're like, look, we'll just load this kid up.
If you're not willing to work, by the way, we don't like you when you're young. We like the young, energized go-getters.
Well, like you said, the youth thing can go both ways, right? Because if you're young and you're lazy, that's a double negative. But if you're young and you're hardworking, then all of a sudden it's like, wow, this kid's got energy. He's got his whole world in front of him, his whole life in front of him. And he may not know anything, but he's willing to learn. He's willing to work his butt off. So that youth turns into a positive as opposed to a negative.
So what did you do? So you did these regular jobs, you did waiting tables and a career-focused job. You figured out, hey, I want to try out real estate. So you're trying things. I've had people on the show that try things and they don't want to do it anymore. What did you do right out of college? Stay with that guy, do something else?
So as much as I enjoyed it, I knew that I was living on the peninsula in Newport. I was working at this tenant rep job. I knew that if I blinked, I'd be 40 doing more or less the same thing. And I was comfortable, right? I mean, who wouldn't be comfortable living 5 houses off from the sand, having all your buddies around, you're going to all the bars and everything else? Pretty fun. But I just was repless. And early in my senior year, or excuse me, middle of my senior year, one of my buddies from Sacramento, he kind of threw out there that after college, I'm moving to New York. His mom's family was from New York, and he had an opportunity to move there. And he's like, I want like one of my buddies to move with me.
Wow.
And kind of sight unseen, I'm like, I'll go with you.
Huh.
So because I knew that if I didn't pull myself out of this comfort zone, which I had kind of created when I was in college, I was president of my fraternity. I had a girlfriend who's now my wife, right? And I'm like, I was comfortable. Like by all accounts, I could have just stayed where I was, put my head down, kept doing what I'm doing, and probably ended up in a good spot by most accounts. But I was restless. I felt the sense that I wanted more. I wanted to see more. I wanted to do more, right?
Which is good. You're pushing the envelope. So
yeah.
Did your wife come with you to New York?
So my wife, as it turned out, was a year younger than me in college, but I did an extra semester to get my minor and my major. Plus I was on my own pace. I was working and everything else. So I wasn't exactly taking, 16 credits every semester or every quarter, but I finished at the end of the fall quarter, my 5th year. At that point, my wife, who was a real go-getter, who's one of those people that in September before her senior year already had a job lined up. She had an internship lined up that summer in New York.
Oh, perfect.
Before she was going to graduate school to get her master's in journalism.
Oh.
So what was interesting, Matt, is I said yes to my buddy Burke to go out to New York.
Before you asked her.
Well, and then, yeah. I mean,
I'm just trying to get to this. So let's just call it what it is. Did you decide to leave your girlfriend and go to New York, and then you were going to come to her and say, I'm moving to New York, you should come too, and just coincidentally she got set up in New York too? Is that how this went down?
More or less, but
yeah, you are in trouble right now. Let's do a little shout out to Yashaar's wife, who is a 5-time New York Times bestseller. So that journalism career paid off. Shout out to her for not being mad at Yashaar based on this podcast. Okay, keep going. This stuff haunts you. If you're married, this stuff comes up like every 10 years. You're in trouble again. I'm sorry about this.
You know what? Honestly, it at the time we were young. We were dating for like a year. It was like you're not thinking like, oh, this is
a year. I just bought my daughter's boyfriend a car yesterday. It was his 10-month anniversary. A year, that's an eternity nowadays.
Well, I love my father-in-law, but there was no cars coming after.
Well, I did it because he doesn't have a car, and they keep asking if he could sleep in my house. I'm like, no. So I bought Jake's car, gave it to him. Happy birthday! You're not sleeping in my house. Good idea. Good idea. So let's get to New York. So you go to New York, and what do you do to find work?
So what's interesting, as soon as I sort of put it out that I would move in New York, all of a sudden, and this is kind of how the universe works, I think. All of a sudden, all the other people I knew, whether they were folks I went to uh, college with, or friends of mine from high school, or friends that went to college with other friends of mine from high school. There was a bunch of people that I ended up knowing that were in New York.
Yeah, people go.
I got there, and my plan was to try to find a job in real estate, but also I needed to get same thing. I needed to make money. So I ended up getting a job waiting tables. So I was in New York for about 5 years. The first year I was in New York, I worked at a restaurant, and that restaurant, and I got lucky because a friend of mine knew the manager, and I got a job. So within about the first month or so that I was in New York, I got a job waiting tables, and I worked there for a little over a year. At the time, that restaurant, which is called Del Frisco's, was the second busiest restaurant in New York City. So it was a great job to get, and there was plenty of people that just worked there as a career, right? It was you could make a living working there.
Yeah.
Again, I worked there. I was comfortable, but I knew I would blink and be 5 years older. And all my buddies that had taken those entry-level jobs when we were right out of college would eclipse me if I didn't pull myself out of that comfort zone. So I started getting more involved in a couple different real estate organizations just to be involved. And I got hooked up with a mentorship program through something called the Urban Land Institute, ULI, which is a really great organization nationally. They've got regional chapters, local chapters, different product focuses and everything else. And they had a mentorship program. I got hooked up with a mentor. He helped me get a job at a large construction management firm. I had no experience with construction management, right? But it was a way in. It was a foot in the door in the real estate world in New York. And once I got there, and we were working on all kinds of big projects, Pfizer's world headquarters, big projects. My group was focused on what they were called special projects and interiors. So some folks would work there for 2 years and only work at one site their entire time. I was fortunate that I had multiple projects at any given time. So I was bouncing around. I was, going from one small, law firm doing a full floor, multi-million-dollar build out, to doing a mechanical retrofit at the Cloisters, which is this amazing museum in Manhattan, and doing a bunch of other stuff. And same thing, I got there, I'm like, okay, top of the food chain here someday is I could be the head of construction for a development firm, or I could own my own construction firm, or I could be an executive at a firm like this. All those are great. I didn't resonate with any of them, right? But I did recognize the value of knowing how to run a project, right? Yeah. How to deal with contractors, how to deal with subcontractors, how to deal with clients, how to deal with payment, right? How to deal with risk, how to deal with project schedules. I also I learned how to replan, right? Which ended up becoming an important part of my career today.
So how long did you stay in this company?
I was there for about 2 years.
And then what came next?
Same mentor. What's that?
What came next?
Well, that same mentor that got me hooked up with that job ended up getting a position at a company called Grubb & Ellis. RIP. So Grubb & Ellis, which was actually big on the West Coast. And as a matter of fact, a couple of my friends were working at Grubb & Ellis in Newport Beach, coincidentally, including one of whom was one of my best friends as well in high school, who went to Long Beach State, moved to Newport. I got him a job at that tenant rep shop before I moved to New York. Yeah. He ended up going to Grubb & Ellis, and all of a sudden we're working for the same company in 2 different offices.
And Grubb & Ellis is kind of known. They're kind of known for being a great place to launch a commercial real estate career. They're kind of known. And the way you get to a place like Grubb & Ellis is what Yashaar did. He's trying different things out. Tried the tenant rep thing out. Tried the construction management. Kind of thinking, where am I going? How does this fit in? And you land at Grubb & So were you doing commercial real estate sales?
No, actually, so my mentor at the time was a really fantastic guy, still a dear friend of mine, John McGinley. He now runs real estate for Chase, JP Morgan Chase. He got brought in to oversee property management and that business for Grubb & Ellis in the tri-state area, kind of New York. And they were looking to grow that business. They were looking to grow the Grubb & Ellis office overall. And he pulled me in. And now all of a sudden I'm working in property management. Working in property management, at that point, I was in my mid 20s. I'd been in New York for 3, maybe 4 years. And I started interacting with the people that owned these buildings in New York. Some of them were big institutions. Some were more entrepreneurial groups. And the one thing that I realized that I had was a blind spot when it came to numbers, right? And not numbers in the sense that I couldn't do math or, I was inept, but I just didn't have that. I didn't have that.
What's a cap rate? What's a good cap rate? What's internal ROI? What's cash on cash? They're all talking this stuff and you don't know it. So you got to go to Columbia and become the master.
Correct. So I knew that if I wanted to level up and again, I felt good about the fact that I had some leasing experience. I have a construction experience. I was getting property management experience. Yeah. But I knew that if I ever wanted to move over to the principal, I used to call it the check writing side of the table, right? Like if I wanted to be on that end of things, and that was what was starting to form, right? I didn't want to be just a service provider my whole life. I wanted to know how to do those things, right? But I ultimately wanted to participate in the value that I was creating, performing those services as a principal, or at least working for a principal.
Okay, so we're going to pause here. This is the path. You're trying to, but if you're listening right now, have it on 1.5 speed because we talk too slow. Don't write anything down while you're driving, but this is the path for almost any career. Dabble, check in with your values, check in with your direction, check in at what the end road looks like, what your life would look like. Try different things, see what fits, trust your gut. And I don't know if you know Craig Atkins. Do you know him? City Ventures?
I know them, yeah.
So I had him on the podcast. I just recorded with him. Same thing. He's doing a bunch of different things. And this guy comes in, stays there for 5 seconds and then leaves. And that's the whatever the title was in that podcast. You can go listen to the Craig Atkins podcast to figure out the title. He said, I want to be the guy that shows up for 10 minutes and drives the Porsche. You're sitting there going, I want to be the person that writes the checks, but you got to know what your weaknesses are. And if you're young, like my weaknesses, I'm disorganized, I'm disheveled. I'm never going to be a detail-oriented person. So I'm giving up.
Right.
But when you're young, a weakness with numbers, that's not a weakness, that's an opportunity. So you decided to go get the finance understanding, apply to Columbia, get the real estate. What was it, the MBA you got?
Master's of Science. MS in Real Estate Development.
MS in Real Estate Development. So you wanted to figure out, I used to have a book sitting right here before. I'm sponsored by Los Abuelos and Fortaleza Tequila. They don't know that, but Fortaleza Tequila, the best tequila. It's not just for breakfast anymore. So you're getting the numbers. And if you want to go into real estate, understanding finance is crucial. If you want to go into real estate development, if you want to go into syndication. So let's shift a little bit because we're going to run out of time. This is your path. And then the end result is you now have Arch Anchor. And Arch Anchor is developing different types of projects in different areas for different use. It might be build and sell. It might be build and hold. And you're bringing in people to invest. So we got the path here. You can start off with tenant repping. You can go into construction management. You can go into property management, figure out your numbers, always working, always adjusting. I want to hear what syndication is and how can someone in their 20s get into syndication if they're on a similar path that they've done other excellent things.
Sure. So obviously syndication is essentially pulling resources, right, so that you can bring together, you're pooling money together on a specific deal, right? On a kind of simple level. And it's a partnership. And again, everything I do in life is formed around partnership because I can only do what I can do. I have my limits, I have my bandwidth, and I have my talents and I have my weaknesses, right? And so to the extent that you can partner, that to me is where you can leverage your own talent and have kind of a multiplicative effect. The syndication is a form of that, where you're pooling money together for an opportunity. And there's obviously different kinds of structures, different roles within a syndication. You can be a part of a syndication as an investor, as a limited partner. You can be part of a syndication as the operator or the sponsor, the general partner. And I've been fortunate to be both. And there are benefits to both. And that's ultimately how, especially when you come from, you don't have seed capital from, a parent or a family friend or an investor. You've got to leverage your own talent, your own experience with other people's money, right? Investors or partners, right? And to the extent you do that, it's because either they like the deal that you're putting in front of them, right? And sometimes that's all it takes. You may not even necessarily know what you're doing, but you just find this opportunity, which could come from any different direction. Your neighbor could just be talking to you and tell you about something. Or more consistently, if you're going to find things that make sense, deal that you put in front of investors, it's because your skill set and your experience resonates with the opportunity.
Yeah. And that's the pause button again. You don't go raise money if you haven't followed a path similar to this. There's construction management experience. There's property management experience. There's tenant rep experience. There's the finance degree. You can't just come out of college with no experience and say, hey, can I have $50 million? Because the way a property works is there has to be equity. So if you're going to do a $100 million deal, you're going to need 20, 25, $30 million of hard cash equity to then borrow the rest of the money from the bank. The bank's not going to loan it to a moron, and the $30 million isn't going to a moron. You've got to have done something. So there's a path to this. And if we go back to the definition of excellence, strong relationships, progress, chasing goals. That's all Yashaar's been talking about. It doesn't happen overnight. It took 5 years in New York, took 4 years in Irvine, and then it took a few years before you launched Arch Anchor too, doing other things. So you get to the point where people, so I have no real estate expertise. In fact, I'm really bad at real estate, but I'd like to invest in real estate. I am not going to go do another deal myself because I've done them and I've lost a ton of money screwing up. I'm going to go to someone like Yashaar and say, hey, Yashaar, what are your deals? Can I invest in that deal? Because I know his construction project's going to get built faster and I'm not going to have an unbuilt property not collecting rent. I know that he's going to cut better deals. He's going to notice things that I wouldn't notice. There's going to be less mistakes. He already made the mistakes in other companies. So if I go and do something myself, I will actually make less money than if I invest money in Yashaar's project because he's got the expertise. So you're building your network and you've got these people that maybe you've done a deal with before. Maybe you've talked to them about a few deals before and they haven't done it, but you have a reputation. If you're screwing people over, if you're failing, if you're dropping the ball, you're not going to last long in that business. But if you kick ass, you're going to do well. So what blanks do I need to fill in from that? What are we missing? What does someone need to know?
Well, I think, again, talking to a 20-something or looking at from that lens, for me, I kind of looked at the fact that I didn't come up the ranks as an analyst, right? Like I wasn't a quant. That always that was an insecurity at one point in my life, right? And you fast forward to today, there's a lot of folks that are in real estate that came up through those ranks, who were quants, who were an analyst, and were sitting there grinding through models and, learning how to underwrite deals and everything else, but they didn't understand the bricks and the sticks, right? They didn't, and going back to New York, I remember working for a big client that was a private equity firm. They were about to crush it on this deal that they had just bought, and they were going to flip it for a big profit without doing anything. And they were going through this checklist, and the questions they're asking, I'm like, they don't actually understand the building that they own, right? But they They knew how to buy it. They knew how to get the money to buy it, and they knew the market, and they knew a lot of other things, but they didn't actually understand the bricks, right? They didn't know if they had a boiler or not have a boiler. They didn't know if they needed. They remember asking me about boiler insurance and like, how much is that going to cost? I'm like, you don't have a boiler. Like, so they didn't even understand their building. So that's when the light bulb went off, and I'm like, we're all kind of equal. There's no way that you can start out, even if you're a finance guru, and also know how to draft a lease.
Yeah, you're not going to know something. You're not going to. So if you've got a finance degree, good job. You need to know the bricks and the sticks. If you got a bricks and the sticks degree like Yashaar did, you need to know finance. You got to fill in those pieces. And then you also get partners that can fill. So you could possibly have not gone to Columbia and have a partner and be you and one other person. And that person has the finance expertise and you're splitting things 50-50. You're just a one-man 50-50.
Yeah. And I'll say, with respect to Columbia and with respect to everything, like the things that I drew from each of those experiences are the people that I met and the relationship that I formed, right? And then those, in many cases, turned out to be future partners, or at least peers that I could commiserate with, right? Because I graduated from Columbia in 2008. The day that Bear Stearns was vaporized was the day before my commencement address.
Yeah.
So, you're joking about like the different summers you have in undergrad. Yeah. And the joke is at the end, at commencement, it's congratulations, you're unemployed. But for us in grad school, it was really like that. It was like, congratulations, you got an Ivy League degree and there's no job, right? And so it was those of us in grad school, there's about 100 kids in our class. I would say a third of them didn't have any real estate experience and never went into real estate despite their degree. They just went and did whatever they were doing before.
Yeah.
Those of us that continued to kind of like progress are the ones that really kind of banded together, hustled, figured out how to kind of.
Well, that's what you're doing. You're strengthening your relationships. You're progressing. You're chasing goals. What you didn't say in your definition of excellence was you're analyzing the end. You're beginning with the end in mind. You got to add that to your definition of excellence. And you're thinking, is this the path I want to go? What's the end? Is this the path I want to go? You're not going to want to go back to doing what you're doing. So you took a chance. And if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you got to take a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as syndications go, because I know that's a topic of discussion today, there's a distinction between a syndicator and an operator, right? Yeah. A syndicator is really someone that's good at raising money, which again, going back to kind of the comparison between bricks and sticks and finance, that itself is a discipline. Learning how to raise money, what people want to hear, what terms that are acceptable, how you actually structure a deal that makes sense. But that person may or may not know actually how to operate real estate. So there's a distinction between a syndicator and an operator. I like to pride myself on being an operator. And to the extent that I've been involved as the general partner in syndication, what I bring to the table is operation, right? I know how to operate a piece of real estate. I know how to identify a business plan, and I know how to run a business plan.
And therefore you charge management fees if you're the operator. So there's the return for being an owner, and oftentimes the operator only owns 10% and the investors own 90%. But there's a management fee that all the owners pay because someone's got to know what they're doing. And by the way, I have a lot of properties. I don't know how to manage them. The only properties I've ever made money on are when I'm the tenant. I just sold a bunch of VRBOs. We lost like 200 grand a year on 23 VRBOs because we didn't know how to operate. So bad investment in myself. I wish I would have, and Yashaar, you even told me that was a bad investment. So we only got a couple more minutes. I know you've been wanting to say something because we've been talking about this podcast. What do you want to get out on this podcast that you haven't gotten out already?
I think that as we started, and I don't want to overstate the importance of relationships, but it really is vital, right? Because if you're looking to start your career, you got to lean heavily on your relationships. When you get to know people, you've got to demonstrate value and a strength of character that's going to strengthen those relationships and make those people want to introduce you to more people. And as you progress in your career, especially if you get into a place where you're going to be raising money and you're going to be responsible or a steward for that money, you've got to have a good relationship, know how to communicate with people, tell people bad news first, right? not be afraid to 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 be honest and transparent about the ups and downs, because there are always going to be ups and downs, especially when you're taking the kind of risk that we're talking about as an entrepreneur, right? So again, it comes back to relationships. It's about finding the right partners. Sometimes you can find a great deal, but you have the wrong partner on it, right? If it's a long term, if it's an amazing piece of real estate that's more of a long term hold, you don't want to invest with a fund that has to return money every 3 to 5 years, right?
Yeah.
Conversely, if you find something that if you find an office building that's vacant and you're like, I can lease this up in 2 years, guess what? You got to get in and out, right? In order to make money, you got to be able to be more of a trader. So you got to be able to find the right partner that understands that kind of business or business plan and has that kind of capital where they're willing to cycle through dollars. They don't want to just put their money into something and wake up in 10 years and it's doubled. So again, it comes down to relationships, appreciating what you bring to the table in that relationship and what they bring to the table in the relationship. Even though it's transactional, I'm going to do something for you, you're going to do something for me, and as a result, what we're doing together is going to be even better. And so I think that's vital. And how you treat people, how you communicate with people, I think is vital to that as well. Being vulnerable, being human.
Your reputation is vital. Yeah. If you're running people over, that's the myth about business people. Business people that run people over, there are some of them. We know some of them. Some of them have gotten pretty famous, even run for office. But very few are the type that run people over. Most are lifting people up. And that's really the way that most of our friends are successful. It's the mentor that Yashaar had. It's the partners he's had. It's the friends. Everybody working for the great. And if you find the right partners, they're going to want you to succeed and them to succeed. Like Bert Selva has Shea Holmes. You just know that he leaves a little bit on the table. Greg Mirage, he told me before, I get out, I leave a little bit on the table for the next person. People want to do deals. People want to go into partnership. People want you to be the operator when you have that kind of value base. Well, Yashaar, I want to respect your time. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate you making time. I'm looking forward to hanging out with you very soon and one day investing in one of your deals because I don't know what I'm doing. Thanks for coming on the show and thanks for sharing your excellence.
I love it, man. It was a pleasure.